Can you hold hands on this table, see if we can contact the living? So the man is a legend in his own right. He runs an organisation that looks after all the legend footballers, and it's just amazing what this man is. He's one of our top speakers in the country, and I'm sure you're going to make him as welcome as you made me. Oh God, made me funny and made the time go fast, please. Gentlemen, MOLBY. Yeah!
Quite nothing like it, is it, to be introduced by somebody who knows fuck all about football. Anyway, a bit of housekeeping just in case there is one or two of you who don't quite remember me when I used to play, and how you kind of survive time is kind of what people say about you, isn't it? You know, so a couple of years ago I thought I'd have a little look at what the most influential people in my career used to say about me. And those guys, of course, are your managers. So my Liverpool managers, Joe Fagan, he was the guy who signed me. He was once quoted as saying, it was probably the best £175,000 I ever spent. Kenny Dalglish, he said, he's the most natural two-footed player I've ever seen. And Graham Souness, he said, Jan is the only player ever to put on fucking weight during a game. Now I started my football career back home in Denmark. I know there's probably one or two people in this room who might believe that I was the first Scouser ever to play for Denmark. And in 1982, at the age of 18, I was transferred to Ajax of Amsterdam. The transfer fee at the time was £110,000. That, believe it or not, was the biggest fee any Danish club had ever received. And I walked in to the dressing room on the first day of training. And in that dressing room, Marco van Basten, Frank Rijkaard, Ronald Koeman, Jesper Olsen, who of course went on to join Manchester United, and also, who I still consider to be the second best player the world's ever seen, a 37-year-old Johan Cruyff. Now, judging by that reaction, you all know who Johan Cruyff is, yeah? Played for Ajax in the late 60s, early 70s. He then went to Barcelona and then on to America. And a lot of people always thought after his little spell in America, do you remember when all the players used to go to America in the late 70s and Cruyff was one of them? And people always thought that was his last ever club football. But it wasn't. Because in 1981, at the age of 36, he returned to Dutch football and Ajax. And when he came back, at that time, Dutch football was on his knees. There was no money, and the reason, because there was no people going to games. So what Cruyff said to Ajax, he said, listen, he said, I'm going to sign a 2-year contract. He said, and you just pay me wherever you can afford. He said, and I'll just gamble on making up my money by bringing back the crowds. He said, at the moment, your average gate is 13,000. He said, whatever that average game will be at the end of the first season I'm here, and again likewise, at the end of the second season I'm here, whatever's in excess of the 13,000 you got at the moment, he said, we'll just split that 50-50 between you, the club, and myself. Now, believe it or not, at the time, Ajax thought, what a great way of getting the great man back, because they didn't have to commit to money that they didn't have. Now, Ajax in those days would use 2 stadiums for the home games. They had a small stadium that held 29,000 people, and of course, back in the 80s, they also used the Olympic Stadium of Amsterdam, which holds 63,000 people. In Johan Cruyff's first season back at Ajax, 1981-82, the club won a domestic double, won the league and the cup, and every single home game at the smaller of the 2 stadiums was a complete sellout. So you worked it out yourself. That is an average gate of 29,000 people. That is more than 16,000 people from when he joined. And the income of those 16,000 people is to be split 50-50 between Johan and the club. Now I know you're all clever men, yeah? You have no idea how much money that was. It was an absolute fortune. In Cruyff's second season at Ajax, 82-83, which was my first season at Ajax, the club had no choice. They moved every single home game, Olympic Stadium Amsterdam. Again, at the end of the season, we won a domestic double, win the league and the cup, and at the end of the season, the average gate is 45,000. Now, I know Cruyff was a great, great player, but look at it like this. In Cruyff's first season back at Ajax, the average game was 29,000. In my first season at Ajax, the average game was an incredible 45,000. So you know what I said before, I thought Cruyff was the second best player in the world. Anyway, leading up to the final game of the season, it's a home game. Johan Cruyff is only days away from being out of the contract, and all everybody's talking about, what's a great man going to do? He came out publicly 2 days before the game to announce that he's going to play for 1 more year. He said, of course, he said, I want to play for Ajax. He said, well, actually, no, I have an agreement with them. He said, and if we can't stick to that, I will go elsewhere. The day before the game, the club had no options. Made a statement and he said, listen, under these terms, there is no way we can afford to keep it. So we're playing, final home game of the season, we've got 63,000 people inside the stadium, we come into the dressing room at half time, we're winning 5-0. As we walk into the dressing room, the first thing you see on the floor is the number 9 kit that Johan Cruyff was wearing in the first half. And one of the players sort of spots him and he goes, I see Johan's kit's on the floor, where is he? And somebody else goes, oh, he stripped off. He's jumped in the bath. So the coach, at the time he was only a young coach, 34 years of age, he goes, I better go and have a word with him. So he walks into the shower area, where Johan Cruyff's in the corner of the bath, having a Marlboro. And the coach goes, Johan, he says, what are you doing? Oh, he says, I'm going to head off home. He said, what do you mean you're going to head off home? It's only half time. He said, yeah, I know that. He said, but believe me, he said, this would be the best time for me to go. So the coach goes, okay, he said, I accept that. He said, well, could you tell me why? He said, after all, we've got a full stadium. They know you're leaving. They also know you're the greatest player they've ever seen and probably will see. And I want to say their farewells. So why right now? Well, Cruyff says, just as you kick off the second half at 4 o'clock, there will be an announcement on radio that I'm joining Feyenoord. Now, yeah. For the benefit of people who don't know, and you wouldn't believe this, would you? Still to this very day, he is still the only footballer ever to go from Ajax to Feyenoord. And nobody has ever gone from Feyenoord to Ajax because of the hatred between these two clubs. And Cruyff goes on to say, and when those 63,000 fucking nutters out there find out, he said, he said, I'd rather be at home. He's gone home. We've gone out to play the second half, and you've never seen anything like it in football. The announcement has been made clear to the fans, Cruyff is joining the final, the fans go mental. You just lose it. anything, everything. They're ripping up all the seats, anything they get hands on, they're chucking stuff on the pitch, and the atmosphere got really, really horrible. And it affected us, the home team, to the extent that with 10 minutes to go, the scoreline, incredibly, was 5-5. But with about 7 minutes to go, Jesper Olsen scored to make it 6-5. I always remember, because it was my first year as a pro, so winning the league was my first major trophy. So with about a minute to go, I was just standing in the middle of the park, because that's what I used to do. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice with maybe a lap of one and a bit of celebration? After all, we just won a domestic double, but you kind of sense with the mood in the stand, there'll probably be a better day, you know. And the final whistle had come, and believe me, 45,000 fans had climbed over the fencing, made their way onto the pitch, where both sets of players were chased down the dressing rooms, but we were actually barricaded inside the dressing room for 8 hours, while the fans wrecked everything they could possibly get their hands on. Cruyff, of course, went on to play for Feyenoord for 1 year, and guess what? With him in the team, they won the Dutch Championship. But I tell the story for 2 reasons. The first reason being, of all the players I've ever played with, even at 37, he was the best. I believe that throughout football history, we have a lot of world-class players. But we only have 5 or 6 who are that little bit better. And I believe he was one of them. Even at 37. An incredible experience. And the second reason I tell the story is that, well, I guess you'll never have another fucking speaker here who's played with Johan Cruyff. Anyway, at the end of that second season, it was the summer of 1984, we'd been out to France for the European Championships with Denmark. It was the first time Denmark had ever qualified for any major championships in football. Eventually, during that championship, we were beaten by Spain in the semi-finals on penalties, and I came back to Ajax. I had a year left on my contract. As soon as I came back, I was called to meet with the coach and the chairman. And as soon as I walked into the office, you know there's things you can't miss. And as soon as I walked in, I couldn't take my eyes off this little board in the corner. There was a little board in the corner, and he had 3 names on it. He said Frank Rijkaard, Ronald Koeman, Jan MOLBY. And I thought, apart from the order, that looks okay to me, right? And the chairman goes, Jan, he said, I can see your nose at the board. You know how we do business. Every summer we try and sell some of our players to balance the books, and the 3 names on the board are the 3 players we'd like to sell. Now, you've been one of them. Any preference where you'd like to go? So I said, yes. I said, I'd love to go to England. I was brought up on English football as a young boy back home in Denmark. I could have joined Ipswich Town in 1981. Bobby Robson wanted to sign me, but I thought at 17 I was a bit too young. But 3 years later, 20 years of age, played 71 games for Ajax, scored in 21 goals, I had 22 caps for the team. I was ready. So Ajax set a fee of £175,000, or at the time, £500,000 guilders. They then informed all top flight clubs in England, and 3 of those clubs came back and agreed that fee. They were Crystal Palace, Manchester City, and Sheffield Wednesday. No, I have to be honest. It wasn't quite what I'd hoped for. I did, however, verbally agree a 3-year contract with Sheffield Wednesday. And the day before I'm due to fly to Manchester Airport to meet Howard Wilkins to sign for Sheffield Wednesday, I get a phone call from Liverpool Football Club. It was a then chief scout, a guy called Tom Saunders. He said, listen, Jan, he said, we've just sold some bloke called Graham Souness to Sampdoria. He said, and we're looking for a replacement. He said, now, we've never seen you play, but you do come highly recommended. He said, but the only way this is going to happen is if you're prepared to ring Howard at Sheffield and tell him that you're joining Liverpool on a 10-day trial. He said, at the end of those 10 days, he said, we might not offer you a contract. He said, but the gamble's yours. Now, Liverpool mid-80s, 1 in a million, isn't it? It's an easy call. I rung Howard at Sheffield, explained the situation. He said, Jan, don't worry about it, he said. If they don't want you, he said, you get the train up here and we'll still sign you. So I'm set to join Liverpool on a 10-day trial. I mean, what do you do on trial? Play a bit of football. I knew I could play. I didn't know whether I was quite good enough for Liverpool or not at the time, but that turned up. And to be fair, the trial has been exactly like I thought it was going to be. I've trained with the first team in the mornings. I've also played 1 or 2 practice matches in the evenings. And I was also introduced to 1 or 2 other things while I was there. One of them being Bruce Grobbelaar, who very kindly introduced me to Scousers. I'd only been in Liverpool for 4 days. It was a Sunday evening, 7:30. I was in my hotel room in the city centre. There's a knock on the door. Some of you might remember this. 1984 being the year that Bruce Grobbelaar was voted the best dressed man in Britain. Remember when you used to see Bruce out in public in those days? He always used to have those long Macs in the hats, you know? And as I've told you, there's a knock on the door. I've opened the door and there he is, Bruce, wearing his long Mac in his hat. I said to him, well, what can I do for you? Because that's how I spoke English at the time. He said, hey my boy, he says, I've come to take you partying. I said, oh Bruce, this is where I come from, mainland Europe. Sunday night, people tend to stay in, rest, and then they go to work Monday morning. Oh yeah, he said, well we're in Liverpool now. He said, and people go partying Sunday night and don't go to work Mondays. So I've got myself ready, and we got out to this wine bar called Streets' Wine Bar in Liverpool. And as soon as we got in there, Bruce was going straight up to the bar. He's ordered a pint of lager and a pint of Guinness. He's handed me the pint of lager. He's then disappeared. I never saw Bruce again till the following morning, 10 o'clock for training. So I'm standing at the bar in Liverpool, 20 years of age, and I just looked for him. I had one of them foreign jumpers on. You know when you go on holiday, and you look at that one fella and you go, where the fuck's he from? But you know what it's like in Liverpool, Scousers can't help themselves. He lasted 20 seconds. Scouser comes right up to me, looks me up and down and he goes, all right there mate, he said. Where are you from then? I said, I'm from Denmark. He went, Denmark? He said, you know Liverpool Football Club? They got one of them Denmark footballers on trial. Do you know him, mate? I said, oh no, I said, I've never heard of him. Ah, never mind, he said. I've heard he's fucking crap anyway. So believe it or not, that's how it all started off. The 10 days went well. At the end of those 10 days, Liverpool offered me a 3-year contract, which of course I signed. Then, what you need to try and get is a game in the first team. Back in the 80s or the 70s, young players who were signed by Liverpool would spend 6 or 12 months playing in the reserves, learning the Liverpool way. I didn't. I made my debut 3 days later. Norwich City away. Now believe me, there's a lot of things to remember my debut. I remember getting to Carrow Road at 5-2, 65 minutes before kick-off. Joe Fagan, 63 years of age, is our manager. He stands up in the dressing room, he goes, Grobbelaar, Neil, Hansen, Lawrence and Kennedy, Lee, Walk, MOLBY, Whelan, Russ, Dalglish, Johnson, and walks off. I'm thinking, wonder what the fuck that was. Now I soon learned it was a team talk, you know. The next thing, getting changed. When I used to play for Denmark and Ajax, we started to get changed about 2 hours before games. But I'm well aware, in England, it's entirely different. So what I've decided to do, I'll just sit and watch for the rest of the game. Believe me, there wasn't a break with that. 20 minutes past 2, 25 minutes past 2, 35 minutes to kick-off. There wasn't one Liverpool player who even took his tie off. But at 20-3, 20 minutes before kick-off, all 12 players are changed. We're as ready as we're ever going to be. But I still only know 2 things. I know I'm playing for Liverpool. I know I'm wearing number 10. The reason I know I'm wearing number 10, I was seated in between number 9 and number 11. Number 9 in the 80s, a great man himself who became, and still is very, very my best friend in football, Ian Rush. And number 11, is John Walk. And as I've just told you, I'm desperate for information. So I'm looking at Rushy, and you probably know as well as I do, Rushy is not the sharpest tool in the box. I thought I'd leave him, you know. I turned to John Walker and I said, go on John, I said, give us a clue. English dressing rooms, 20 minutes before kick-off. I said, what happens next? Oh yeah, he said, brand new experiences, he said. Here, he said, we don't do anything before games. He said, if you have to do anything, you need to do anything, he said, you're on your own. He said, but of course, he said, the longer you stay with us, you will get used to it. He said, if I give you one piece of advice, he said, why don't you go over there in that corner, he said, with the staff having a cup of tea. He said, I'm sure if you've got any questions, they'll be more than happy to help. So I'm walking across the dressing room floor, and in the corner we've got Joe Fagan, the manager, Ronnie Moran, assistant manager, Roy Evans, first team coach. And before I can get over there, the assistant manager has already spotted me, and he sort of turns around and he looks at him and he goes, hello there, he said, what can we do for you then? And I'm thinking, maybe a massage to loosen the muscles would be nice. Maybe a warm-up just to get your heart rate going just before kick-off. Maybe even some food that doesn't come wrapped in fucking newspaper, you know. I do never realise that asking for all those things would be greedy. So all I said was, I just wondered, would there possibly be one piece of information you could give me that would help me understand what exactly you would like me to do once I get out there at 3 o'clock? And before Ronnie Moran could answer me, Joe Fagan, the manager, sort of tilts his head, looks at me and he goes, oh yeah, he said, you're just like the fucking rest of them. Pardon? I said, pardon? I said, what do you mean? He said, foreigners. He said, you're all the fucking same. I said, but I've only come up to ask you. And he went, yes, he said. And he said, you know when you get out there at 3 o'clock? He said, I have no fucking idea what's going to happen. He said, but when you come back in at 4:45, he said, believe me, he said, I will be the fucking first one to let you know whether you know what you're doing or not. I know that moment in your career where you go, I quite like this, I'm going to stay here. So I did. 12 years. I ended up staying 12 years at Liverpool, and that is still a record for a foreign player to be at one club. And during that 12 years at Anfield, I also became, and still is, the record scorer of penalties in the history of Liverpool. I do, however, now share that record with Gerrard. However, he has missed 9.
2 more go, not 3.
And I also became, and still is, the only Liverpool player ever to score a hat-trick of penalties. In November 1986, at Anfield against Coventry City, I scored a hat-trick of penalties. And you would think, wouldn't you, that that game, we won 3-1 on the night, would be famous for my hat-trick of penalties. But it's not. The game was actually famous because it was the first time, as a 6-year-old, Steven Gerrard ever watched the first team play an Anfield. And you know when Gerrard picks up a ball now to take a penalty, and his record is he scores 84% of his penalties. I've often wondered how different that could have been if he'd have paid a bit of fucking attention. Now also during the 80s, which is all my main memories, I think there can be very little doubt that for a short spell we were probably the greatest club side in the world. The most memorable game I ever played in was a 1986 FA Cup final. It was mentioned before with the Kenny Dalglish shirt. You know when you have a dream as a young boy, and I'm sure most of you had the same dream, and you go, I tell you what I'd love to do one day. I'd love to play in an FA Cup final, wouldn't I? That was my dream. That was one of the reasons I came to England in 1984, because people used to say to me, why aren't you going to Italy? Because that's where everybody went. In Italy, that's where the money was. I said, I've come here because I want to play Wembley, in a cup final. Now, 1986 wasn't actually the first time I ever played at Wembley. The first time I ever played at Wembley was a 1983 European qualifier. England 0, Denmark 1. Goes down very well in Wales and Scotland. Friends from Denmark over here, you know. And the second time I ever played at Wembley was the 1984 Charity Shield. It was Everton 1, Liverpool 0. I don't know if you remember that day, but Bruce Grobbelaar actually scored an own goal that day. But I can tell you what he told me on a Friday night. We were sitting in the reception hotel and Bruce had this piece of paper and he goes, do you know what, Jan? He said, I'm just having a little look here. And I think I'm a bit of fucking value at 60-61 to score the first goal. Now also during the 80s came the greatest goal I've ever scored for them. Now when you score great goals, there is no need for you to stand up and tell people about it, because more often than not, you receive these goals again and again and again. Barnes against Brazil or Maradona against England, you see great goals a million times. However, this goal that I scored on the 26th of November 1985 at Anfield in front of 42,000 people is slightly different. Because unless you were there, you might never have seen this goal. And the reason, and some of you will remember this reason, due to the fact that there was no TV deal in place at the start of the 85-86 season, there was no cameras at any games during the first half of the season. And during that period, I scored this goal. And because I know that most of you weren't there, I know it's a great goal, I'm just going to talk you through it. The game was against Manchester United. Now Manchester United that season had equalled a top flight record of winning their first 10 league games of the season. And they come to Anfield on Wednesday night, they give us a bit of a go, no, we're going to beat 1-0. Paul McGrath had scored in the first half in the Cup Emmett. We're into the second half, 57th minute. There's a 50-50 challenge, 75 yards from goal, right on the touchline in front of the dugout between Norman Whiteside and myself. I won the challenge against Whiteside, I've gone to the other side and I'm thinking, I'm just going to play this forward to Russ at that place. Can't see no Liverpool players in front of me, all behind me. That's how far back we can push. All I can see, Paul McGrath, Brian Robson, Gordon Strachan, left back Clayton Blackmore, two centre halves, Graham Hawke and Kevin Moran. So I'm thinking, it's probably highly unlikely that if I build up a bit of momentum, that there'll be anyone quick enough to get up and support me, you know what I mean? So I might be on my own here. So I've set off, I've gone past Brian Robson, I've gone past Paul McGrath, and as I'm crossing the halfway line, Clayton Blackmore sort of gets in the way, so I'll push him out the way. And now, I've only got the two centre halves left. Now, Graham Hawke, even Manchester United fans struggle with that name. Yeah, is anyone? I mean, Graham Hawke definitely wasn't a great Manchester United player, was he?
Or Hearts.
The other fellow, however, Kevin Moran. Now, Kevin is a really, really good player. And he's a bit of a fucking lunatic, you know. So I'm thinking, I'll go past Hawke, he won't give me too many problems. And before I get to the loon, I'll just hit it. So I set off, I go past Graham Hawke, and from 25 yards I hit this shot, and you know yourself, you play golf, you play cricket, you play football, you know. When you hit one, you know. As soon as I left my boot, it's only one place it's going. Like a missile, into the top corner, hit the stanchion, and it was actually back out before some people inside Anfield realised it was a goal. In, out, great goal. Anything wrong with it? I do sometimes wonder whether I might have scored that goal about 4 years too early. Because if I stand up here tonight and tell you that Peter Schmeichel was in goal, I know you'd be impressed. Because Gary Bailey fucking scored. However, let me tell you about that goal. 4 years ago in 2010, it was 25 years since I scored that goal. There is a private recording. It is available on YouTube. It's not a joke. You go on YouTube, you put in Jan MOLBY, that goal, and you can see it. Do it later, do it in the morning, it's well worth a look, yeah? And when you look at it, I mean, we haven't done anything but the speed of the save anything. That's how fucking quick it was. So. Anyway, out of the 80s and into the 90s, and again, one of these iconic games a lot of people remember. It was an FA Cup replay at Goodison Park and at Everton 4, Liverpool 4. At the end of that game, Kenny Dalglish decides he's had enough. Eventually, we get ourselves a new manager, Graham Souness. Now, there's enough people in this room who remember Souness as a player, and I'm sure you'll all agree. Souness as a player, on his day, he was as good as you're ever going to get. And when he came back to manage Liverpool in 1991, he'd been out to Italy for 3 years as a player. He then went up to Scotland for 4 years as a player manager. So believe me, when he came back to Liverpool, he picked up a lot of new ideas. I mean, he changed as many things as he could. Down at the training, we had new pitches to train on, we had a new canteen, we had new dressing rooms. I mean, he even put this small building at the end of one of the dressing rooms. So it was a few weeks we discovered it was a fucking gym, you know. But Souness, due to the 3 years he'd spent in Italy, had become totally obsessed with one thing and one thing only, which was fitness. And we come in for training one Monday morning, he calls a meeting in the main dressing room, sits us all down, all 23 senior pros. And he goes, listen lads, he said, whether you like it or not, when I look at this squad, what I see so many players, late 20s, early 30s. He said, that is the age where you start to do something after fitness. And also, you will start to put on some weight. He said, so what I've done after training, I've got this guy coming in, he's a dietitian, and he'll spend 5 minutes with each of you. He said, at the end of those 5 minutes, you'll all have something what is called your match weight. He said, and when we weigh you every Friday morning, we expect you to be on your match weight or below. He said, if not, he said, believe me, you won't play on a Saturday. And he said, before anybody say anything, I'm well aware that this football club has never had a pair of scales. He said, so I've just bought, for £2,500, a speak your weight machine. So we come in for this first Friday morning, this speak your weight machine. Ian Russ and myself get there at 9:20. 9:30 was down to queue, and because we're getting weighed in the physio's office, only a small office, so we're all sort of queuing out through the door and down the corridor, all 23 of us, and you kind of know what it's like when a big group of lads are getting weighed. The people at the back are always a giveaway, aren't they? I'm last, you know. Right in front of me is Neil Bullock. But because it's a speak your weight machine, while you wait, you can actually hear it. It's going 11 stone 8, 10 stone 6. And I'm thinking, wonder what the fuck they're weighing. You can't be a whole person, can you? Eventually I'm in there, it's 10 to 10 on a Friday morning, I'm 6 to 9. There he is in the corner, 37 years of age, black pair of shorts, so up, tight black t-shirt, not an ounce of fat. He said, morning, Jan. I said, morning, Gaffer. He said, are you looking forward to this big fella? I said, oh, personally, I said, I can't wait. I said, I know a few of the chubby ones have been a little bit worried about us. I said, I don't even know, I said, but just before you came back to manage Liverpool, I did sign a brand new 4-year contract, so there might be a few fucking weekends off at this rate, you know what I mean? No, he said, yeah, don't be like that. He said, I'm not just picking on you. He said, this is a general thing with the whole squad. He said, as you know, if we deal with this, you will play better, you will play longer. He said, you know, every Saturday, 3 o'clock, he said, you know I want you out there. He said, so before you jump on those scales, he said, tell me, what's the lightest you've ever been? I said, well, Gaff, I said, this you might find hard to believe. I said, but I was once £7 3 ounces. Anyway, we're going to some question and answer, but let me just tell you a couple of stories about Rushy. You know, people always go, I mentioned before, Rushy's my best mate. Walked into Melbourne, this is our training ground, met Rushy, we got on like a house on fire. I'm not sure why, we were both single, just happened. And everywhere Rushy went, I was with him. And because of that, I just had more genuine Ian Rush stories than anyone else. Do you remember when he was Juventus in 1987? I mean, we sold him and then kept him for the year. And during that period, in that year, Juventus did everything to try and make it as comfortable for Rushy as possible when he moved to Italy, including learning Italian. So every Tuesday night and every Thursday night, at a college in Liverpool, there was an Italian teacher available to teach Rushy Italian. And he said to me, Jan, he said, do you fancy coming along? I said, I don't mind, I like languages, I'll come along. First Tuesday, the Tuesday went along, taught a bit of Italian. Next time was a Thursday night, we both went along, a bit more Italian. Then the following Tuesday, he didn't turn up, so it was only me. I thought, well, give it one more go. So the following Thursday, I turned up, he didn't turn up. I thought, well, sod him. I said, because I'm not going to Juventus, so never mind. So we binned it. But he's signing for Juventus and he's flying to Turin, and I was on the plane. And we land in Turin, and you know when you get off the plane, you see them with their hand, pull up the scarf, and they, I'm here, you know. So Rusty's going like me to me, going, yeah, come on. I said, you're on your own, mate. I said, they've signed you, not me. All the best. So he gets off the plane, 200 press guys, 4,000 fans, all singing his name. Iron Rush, Iron Rush. Bear in mind, he's been learning Italian for 12 months. There's a guy on a microphone, give it all blah, 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 Iron Rush. And they all go mental and they give him the microphone, expecting Rushy to say something, you know. He grabs the microphone, looks at them all, and he pushes his right hand up and he goes, welcome.
Really?
Fucking welcome. And then at Christmas he rung and he said, Jan, I need to come back. He says, like living in a foreign country. Anyway, when I mentioned before about the 85-86 season, when there was no cameras in any game, the first game that was televised that season was in January when Watford played Liverpool on a Sunday afternoon. And the night before that game, we're in our hotel. We're in our hotel rooms at 9 o'clock at night and the fire alarm goes off. And you know what it's like when you stay in a hotel, the fire alarm goes off? You put your clothes on, you go and stand outside the hotel for 10 minutes, then they tell you false alarm, back to your rooms. Well, that night, the fire alarm goes off again at 4 o'clock in the morning. This time, however, Rushy doesn't wake. So I'm having to shake him. And eventually he wakes and he goes, what do you want? I said, the fire alarm. He's gone, oh, bloody hell, he said. I hope it's not another false alarm. Actually, 28 years ago, Rushy still doesn't think that's funny. I said, what the fuck do you want? Do you want a little fire somewhere? Second, third, yeah. Anyway, favourite all-time Rushy story, before you get an opportunity to ask some questions. It was in 1985, the staff at Anfield are going to have a charity cricket match at a place called MOLBY Cricket Club. The match is going to be between the staff and the players. So, in those days, in the 80s, and some of you remember this, that the 80s, bars on a Sunday would open between 12 and 2. Yeah. So the cricket club rung the football club and said, listen, by the time your cricket match is finished, our bar will be closed. So if you want anything to eat, anything to drink, you'll have to bring it home. So the staff got all the players together and they said, listen, everybody, and we mean everybody, bring some food, bring some drink, we'll have a great day. Now that Sunday morning, 9:30 in the morning, I'm up in North Wales, outside Rushy's mum and dad's house, beating the horn, trying to get them out. On my back seat, I've got beer, wine, burgers, sausage and bread rolls. Because I must bring something. Rushy comes out the house, jumps in the car, he's bought fuck all. I said, are you not bringing anything then? No, he says, I'm not. I said, any reason? Well, he says, I've been thinking. And I think if everybody brings something, there should be more than enough there. So I went, probably, I said, well, that's not why we're doing it. I said, we do it as a team bonding exercise. I said, and we all muck in like we always do. And I said, you and me not turn up at Anfield, and you haven't brought any food, you haven't brought any drink. I said, one or two of the boys might not be too happy. Ah, never mind, he said. Just fucking drive. So I'm driving in towards Liverpool, gets to a place called Birkenhead. It's 10 past 10 on a Sunday morning. Birkenhead. There's a little Sainsbury's. Rushy spots the Sainsbury's and he goes, now go on then, he says. Pull over. I better go and get something. So he runs into Sainsbury's, he's back out 2 minutes later. He's bought a bag of ice. Shucks the bag of ice in the back, so he jumps in the front. I thought I better check this one. I went, you bought a bag of ice then? Oh, yeah, and he said, I bought the ice so we can put in our drinks later this afternoon. I said, well, yeah, I said, I kind of gathered that. I said, but there is a problem with that because it'll take us 15 minutes from here to Anfield And once we get to Anfield, which I'm on the first team coach to Formby, which is another 35 minutes, I said it'll probably be melted by then. Oh, yeah, he said. I never even told her that. I better go and get another bag. Any questions, please?
Right. Gentlemen, if you've got any questions, you put your hands up.
Yeah, don't be shy.